Okay, so plant reproduction, asexual notes. You need to have the note sheet that looks like this. And yep, you're going to have to fill in a little bit on these boxes here. Before we talk about asexual reproduction though, let's just do a quick review of sexual reproduction. So let's look at these parts. Remember that flowers have male and female parts. Remember that you can remember that the male part is called the stamen because the word men is in it. So that's going to be the male part, which is made up of this piece and this piece. This is called the anther. And this stalk is the filament. Okay, then the female part over here is called the pistil. The very top of it is called the stigma. This area where the pollen tube grows down through is the style. And this is the ovary at the base. You've got petals on your flower, and you've got sepals over here. The female part is the pistil, and the male part is the stamen. Okay, so make sure you review that. You'll definitely need that information. Alright, so let's go on to asexual reproduction. So remember that when we talked about asexual reproduction, we said that it requires only one parent. In this case, we're talking about plants, so it requires one parent plant or plant part. And there are different ways for plants to reproduce asexually. Self-pollination is an asexual process, and that happens when pollen of the same plant fertilizes the egg. Cross-pollination is a sexual type of reproduction, and that happens when pollen from one plant fertilizes a second plant. Okay, so this is a good drawing that shows you how sexual reproduction occurs, but if the pollen from one plant fertilizes itself, basically, then that is an asexual form of self-pollination. Okay, so new plants, you grow new plants from their plant parts. Make sure you have those filled in on your note sheet. So one way that plants can reproduce asexually, some plants like fruit trees, bushes, sweet potato, they send out new shoots or suckers from the roots. So here's an example. You've got this particular plant here. This is probably a bush. It sends out this sucker from the roots, and out pops a new plant. Okay, so that is a good example of one type of asexual reproduction. This is a second type of asexual reproduction. You notice here, I have one of these on my desk. I've got a leaf from an African violet, and it's sitting in a jar of water with the stem down in the water. And I'm hoping that within the next couple of weeks we're going to see what's happening here is that roots are forming. Okay, so this is called a stem cutting, and that's exactly what we did. Was we cut a leaf off of a plant that was growing, and we're putting it in water. So in this case, a cut stem forms new roots. You can do this with pineapple. I've seen people cut the tops off of pineapple and then keep them moist, and they'll start producing roots. You can then plant that and grow a new plant. So two ways that asexual reproduction occurs in plants are through roots, sending out new shoots or suckers, and also from stem cuttings. Another way is through tubers and bulbs. And I bet you've seen this at your house maybe. I know I've seen it at mine, where our potatoes have been sitting maybe a little bit too long and they start to sprout. In this case, you've got underground stems that sprout. Tubers sprout from eyes. And that's what we call these little things on the surface of your potatoes. So these are eyes, and that's the plant starting to sprout again. Bulbs are big buds. An example would be an onion. You see, you've got onions that grow underground, and they are making large buds, which we then eat. Okay, so another example, tubers, in the case of your potato, growing eyes, and then onions in the form of bulbs being produced. A couple more ways are runners and leaves. Now, runners can be produced, I see this, strawberry plants, grasses, some grasses, ivy. I know that the Bermuda grass here does this, and you'll see that a sprig of grass can be very long and kind of cover a large area in your yard. If you've got some weeds you think or grass that's kind of growing up where you don't want it, when you start to pull it, you notice that it's kind of attached in several places along the ground where you have to pull it up through. So these are runners, and these are stems that run along the ground, and then they produce new plants. Some other organisms, other plants that can be, this is sometimes called vegetative propagation, where an asexual form of reproduction is by taking the leaf and actually sitting it on top of the soil. Some plants will actually start to form roots. So African violets can produce plants from leaves placed on top of the soil, which is kind of a strange happening, but it does occur. So several ways that plants can reproduce asexually. Types of asexual reproduction. So let's match them up. This was that African violet, roots. This was your potato forming eyes. This is self-pollination. The stems here. And you've got runners. And this looks like it should be, oh, I'm sorry, roots here. I got this one in the wrong place. This is the leaf on top of the soil, and it will produce roots. And then this is like the bush that is sending out roots that form new plants. Okay, so self-pollination, runners, and this is like your grass, your Bermuda grass, and different things like strawberries. Stems, it's called a stem cutting. Leaves can be placed, some of them can be placed on soil and new plants will grow. Bulbs, in this case a tuber, growing eyes. Onions would also be a good example of reproducing asexually by bulbs. And then roots. And that is the end of your notes on asexual reproduction.